The morning sun was bright, but to me, the world already felt heavy. My grandson Adil had called me the night before, his voice trembling with excitement. "Grandma, I finally got approved for a business loan. But I need your help. The bank requires someone trustworthy to stand with me. You're the only one I can count on." The words filled my heart with warmth. After all, hadn't I raised him like my own son when his father passed away so young? Every wrinkle on my face carried a story of sacrifice I had made for this boy. And now, when he needed me, I would not refuse. I dressed carefully that morning, wearing the same blue shawl I wore at his graduation ceremony years ago, a symbol of my pride. As I entered the bank with Adil by my side, I walked with slow steps, leaning on my cane, but my heart felt strong. I was ready to prove that I was still useful, still important, still his pillar. The cool air of the bank brushed against my skin. People shuffled in lines. The sound of pens scratching against paper, the beeping of cash counters, and the low hum of conversations all merged into a strange music of money. I looked at Adil's face, his eyes sharp, his suit neat, his hair combed with care. He looked grown, confident, almost like his father once did. We approached the counter. A young banker, perhaps no older than Adil, smiled politely. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Adil straightened his shoulders. "I'm here to finalize my loan. This is my grandmother. She's going to sign as a co-signer." I nodded gently, my hands clutching my purse, ready to take out my identification papers. The banker looked at me with respect, then at Adil, waiting for his instruction. But suddenly, Adil's tone changed, sharp, cold, dismissive. "Actually," he said with a dry laugh, "don't let her sign anything. She's just my grandma. She doesn't understand these things." The words slammed into me harder than any blow. Just my grandma. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened. My vision blurred, and the papers in my hand trembled. I looked at him, my own flesh and blood, standing there with pride in his voice but shame in his eyes. Shame not for himself, but for me. The banker looked confused, his pen hovering in midair. If she's the co-signer, she must sign. Adil cut him off. "No, don't bother her. She's old. She doesn't know what's going on. I'll figure it out." I stood frozen, my throat burning with unshed tears. In that crowded bank, with strangers shuffling around me, I had never felt more alone. My cane pressed into the floor, my body swaying, not from weakness but from betrayal. Was I not the same grandmother who sold her gold bangles so he could go to university? Was I not the same woman who walked miles to pay his school fees when his father's salary wasn't enough? Was I not the one who stayed awake at night when he was sick, praying with every heartbeat for his health? And now, in front of strangers, I was reduced to nothing more than just grandma. I wanted to speak. I wanted to scream. But my lips quivered and my voice was trapped in my chest. Instead, I looked down at the floor, hiding my tears. The banker cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, we can proceed with alternative options." I heard nothing else. My ears buzzed, my mind spinning. I took a step back, clutching my shawl tightly around me, as if it could protect me from the dagger his words had left inside. At that moment, I realized something deep and painful. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from enemies, but from those who once called you their whole world. I said nothing. Not yet. But inside, a storm was beginning to rise. That night, I lay awake in my small room, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly, creaking with every turn. Sleep would not come. The words echoed endlessly in my ears. "She's just my grandma." I pressed the pillow against my chest and closed my eyes. But instead of rest, memories came rushing back. Soft at first, then sharp, each one slicing deeper into my heart. I remembered the day Adil was born. His father, my only son, had carried him into the house, wrapped in a thin hospital blanket. The boy's tiny cries filled the air, and when I held him for the first time, my heart melted. My son smiled at me with tired eyes and said, "Amy, he will know the warmth of your hands before anything else." And he did. When his mother was too weak, I cradled him in my arms through the night. My lap was his first pillow. My lullabies were his first songs. Every wrinkle on my face, every gray strand in my hair, carried his childhood in it. But life is cruel. My son was taken too soon. A car accident. I still remember the rain that night, how the telephone call shattered our world. Suddenly, the weight of the entire family fell on me. I was no longer just a grandmother. I was both father and mother to Adil. I sold my wedding bangles, the ones my husband had given me on our wedding night, to pay Adil's school admission. I never told him. How could I? A child should not carry the burden of his elders' sacrifices. When he grew sick with fever, I sat beside his bed, pressing a wet cloth against his forehead, whispering prayers until the fever broke. On winter mornings, I would wake before sunrise, my fingers numb from the cold, just to prepare his favorite parathas before school. There were days when I had only one roti to eat, but I pretended I wasn't hungry so that he could have two. There were months when the rent was late, and I swallowed my pride, sewing clothes for neighbors to earn extra money. Through it all, I never once complained, because every smile of his was worth 1,000 sacrifices. I remembered his graduation day. The university lawn was filled with laughter and cameras clicking. He stood tall in his black gown, his cap slightly crooked, holding his degree with pride. I wore the same blue shawl, the one I wore to the bank just yesterday. When they called his name, my hands trembled as I clapped, tears streaming down my face. "Grandma, this degree is yours too," he whispered, hugging me tightly. Back then, I believed him. Back then, I thought love and loyalty could never fade. But yesterday, in that sterile bank, surrounded by strangers, all those years of love and sacrifice had been reduced to, "She's just my grandma." The boy I raised, the boy I gave my life for, had erased me in a single sentence. I sat up on my bed, clutching my shawl. My heart ached, but my mind began to clear. Love is a gift, yes. But blind love makes fools of us. I realized something that night. Maybe it was time I stopped seeing myself as only a giver, and started remembering the strength I still carried. Because if my grandson could forget who I was, then I needed to remind not just him, but myself too. The morning after my sleepless night, the house felt heavier than ever. The walls that once echoed with Adil's laughter seemed to mock me now with their silence. I moved slowly through my small kitchen, preparing tea the way I always did, but even the steam rising from the cup couldn't warm the ache inside me. For years, I had lived for others, my children, then my grandson. My hands had baked bread, sewn clothes, scrubbed floors, and held sick foreheads. My worth had been measured only in what I could give, never in who I was. But yesterday at the bank, a truth had been spoken aloud. Sharper than any knife to my grandson, I was just grandma. I carried that sentence with me all day, like a stone pressing against my chest. Yet as the hours passed, something inside me shifted. At first it was pain, but slowly, quietly, it began to feel like power. That evening, I opened an old wooden trunk at the corner of my room. Inside lay my life's forgotten papers, yellowed property deeds, bank passbooks, and legal documents with my name written boldly across them. I ran my fingers over the ink, realizing that I had more than just memories. I had ownership. The small house Adil lived in with his mother, still in my name. The land in my village, mine too. Even the savings account my late husband had left behind, untouched for years, still belonged to me. Adil thought I was powerless, too old to matter. But the truth was, every brick that sheltered him, every coin that fed him, every thread of comfort he wore, came through me. And yet he had dared to reduce me to just grandma. That night, I sat by the window, the moonlight washing over me. I didn't feel anger burning in me like fire. No, it was colder, calmer, sharper. I realized that revenge doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers, waits, and cuts deeper in silence. I thought of confronting him, of shouting at him for what he said. But then I shook my head. Words fade. He would forget them in a week, no. My revenge would not be in words, it would be in actions, in choices, in the very legacy he expected to inherit. I began to plan quietly. I would visit the lawyer. I would adjust the will. I would redirect the wealth I had built, not to the ungrateful boy who dismissed me, but to those who had shown me kindness. The neighbor's daughter who always carried my groceries without being asked. The local orphanage, where children ran barefoot yet still smiled at me with respect. The charity hospital that never turned away the poor. They would be the heirs of my love. My blood had failed me, but humanity had not. In that moment, for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like just grandma. I felt like a woman who had built, endured, and sacrificed. And now, I would decide where my story ended, not with betrayal, but with dignity. And when the time came, Adil would learn that the woman he dismissed in front of strangers was the same woman who held the keys to everything he thought belonged to him. That would be my revenge. Not with bitterness, but with justice. Not with cruelty, but with truth. The sweetest revenge of all.